This is a main topic that kind of hits close to home.
All right.
And whenever I was writing this down for us, you saw what I was writing down and you thought, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, guys, we got to not pretend with our gear.
What do you mean?
So what I mean is there is a huge part of me that I love this Marshall, but I don't need to pretend like I'm going to be taking this Marshall out every weekend. I don't need to pretend like I need one type of every guitar because I'm not playing in studio environments all the time. I'm not playing in a stadium. I'm not playing in all these different places. What's the gear that I'm going to be using most that I really need to be using? Let's get down to the bones of it and get really down to the root of it. What do I need to be playing? I probably don't need to be pretending that I'm going to be using this gear for this thing. I'm going to use it one time every 3 years for that.
Yeah.
I think we have to step away from trying to think that we need to collect all these items to get through. We talked about before, like almost getting through a checklist of gear. I almost feel like I've got to get through this checklist because then I've got all these things to make these sounds. But am I really going to be using those, or should I be really concentrated on the best gear for what I'm really doing and stop pretending like I'm doing something different?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
So what you meaning is don't be like Pokemon and try to collect them all.
Gotta catch them all.
Yeah, kind
For
of.
the sake of collecting them all.
Yeah, and don't pretend like you're going to be using a piece of gear for something that, like, no, you're probably really not. Like, let's get a little more realistic with it.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah. I think, well, I mean, it's our human nature, I feel like, that we want to try to get as many sounds that we're interested in when it comes to guitar stuff and try to collect everything that would be really cool to have.
Right.
I mean, you've talked about you're interested in a 2-rock.
Yep.
Is that something that you would use all the time when you got a deluxe reverb?
No. Oh, well, maybe if I had it.
I don't know.
But the deluxe is probably the one that's going to go out with me most.
Right.
Yeah.
If you had a Blues Junior, would you use this deluxe?
Yeah, that's hard, right?
That's what I'm saying. So, I mean, I'm calling you out. I can call myself out.
Yeah.
I've got a Vox AC15 head and cab. I don't use it because it takes up space. But I got a Tweed Deluxe that's really not great for the gig. The Vox has an attenuator on it.
Yeah.
So, like, if I could marry the two in an idea, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But I can't do that.
Deluxe is so much easier to carry,
So
move
much easier.
around.
Yeah, it takes up less space. I've got a Bogner Alchemist. It's great, but it is so heavy. I don't want to take it anywhere.
Yeah.
I've got a vintage Bassman head that really just sits at home because I'm afraid to take it out. And also, it's like a history piece.
Yeah.
I love the sound of it. It's the sound of my head. But am I going to take it anywhere? No.
Yeah.
So I think there are things that we need to be honest with ourselves, like what is the best piece of gear for the gig that we're doing? But also, like, if you play in a bunch of different genres or if you play in a bunch of different bands that are very different from each other, I mean, you kind of do have to collect them all.
Yeah, and we play a lot of styles. And when we play with different people, we do cover a lot of styles.
Yeah,
we can
we do.
cover everything from heavier rock stuff to like old school bluegrass stuff, depending on who we're playing with, and everything between.
Right.
So we do feel like we need
Not
to cover
that we're
a lot of
good
stuff.
at any of it.
Yeah, I'm
but,
not
you
saying
know.
we're great at any of it, but that's what we attempt to play.
Yeah.
And I think for us, there is a lot of gear that we've got to have to cover a lot of ground. But I do find myself going down the rabbit hole sometimes of like really wanting and gassing for a piece of gear to, lead into our next segment here a little bit, but gassing for a piece of gear that I'm probably not going to use that much.
Right.
I should probably be more concentrated, more concerned with the gear I'm using currently on my day-to-day basis.
Honestly, I feel like the biggest proponent of this topic is pedals. Because there's so many pedals where like we need this. And we get it and we use it and then it goes in the bin.
Yeah.
And then we get another pedal and it goes in the bin. And then there's pedals I've thought about selling. Like my Full Tone OCD, I've thought about selling that thing 1,000 times. Guess what? I'm using it on the gig I play.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I think it totally depends on, what you're actually doing. But I think pedals are the biggest proponent of like pretending what we need, or, pretending to try to have all the sounds or something like that.
The pedals are hard too because it feels like the topping on the ice cream, right? Like you've got your bass stuff, your amps, and your guitars. And then depending on what drive pedal you want to use that night, depends which topping you're putting on. Do you want those M&Ms? Do you want sprinkles?
Yeah.
But I think my biggest issue is I go down rabbit holes. I mean, sometimes I kind of lose my mind going down rabbit holes
We all do.
of like, oh, how great would it be to have that? And I start thinking in my head, I'm like, that's 100-watt head and 2 412 cabs I'm looking at. Why am I looking at this? This is ridiculous. I'm not going to use that.
Right.
The other day I was looking at Bogner Ecstasy 101Bs.
You don't need that.
No, I don't, but I want one.
You've got a super lead. Why would you need, 1987X?
Yeah, but there's part of me that really wants a Bogner Ecstasy, like the 101B old school style.
It would be cool.
It would be cool, but I don't need that. Like,
No.
why am I pretending like I need that or could use? Honestly, I could use it for practice at home or like just jamming at the house. But I'm not going to take that to a gig.
Right.
Well, I could, but it would be ridiculous.
Little overkill.
A little overkill.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of got to like pull the reins in a little bit on myself because I can go down some wild routes with things. I
Yeah.
think I'm better with guitars. And my pedals, I feel like maybe it's me just like trying to justify it, but I feel like I kind of don't care how many pedals I end up with in the grand scheme of
They
things.
take up less space.
They take up less space, but also like I've had tons of pedals like you're talking about with your OCD that have fallen off my board. And then years later, I haven't touched this pedal in forever. A gig comes up or I buy a new amp or something and that pedal comes back in the fold and it's like the mainstay.
Yeah.
So pedals are a little trickier for me. Like just because I get a new delay pedal doesn't mean I need to dump an old delay pedal.
Mm-hmm.
And also there isn't like a delay pedal out there. I guess there technically is some, but there's not a delay pedal out there that's way bigger and way more obnoxious and way more delay than what I need versus an amp.
Right.
It can be way bigger, way more obnoxious, and way more than what I need for the gig.
Yeah.
So I guess my point in saying all this and bringing it up is maybe we just need to be a little more cautious about how many rabbit holes we go down with this gear.
Oh, I mean, we're literally a channel about gear, and you can't help it sometimes. When you're just flipping through and you're just like, all right, here's another thing like I could use. Here's another thing. Oh, look at that. It's kind of like going in a hardware store and you're like, well, I could use that tool.
Yep.
I could use that. Like you could spend your whole life savings going in,
Oh, yeah.
hardware store. So
Yeah. Well, thanks, Reverb.
yeah, thanks a lot.